First of all, I don't know that I've fully welcomed Mendocino and Butte and Shasta College and College of San Mateo and Fresno City College are all joining us today, as we mentioned. So we want to be aware of that. Don't be too freaked out by the microphones in the middle. That's really so that they can hear us when we have questions and be a part of that, because they will be dialoguing at their own sites at the same time that we are. So let's talk a little bit about Sonia. In your folder, you have kind of her bio, and I'm not going to read all of that to you. She's an extremely accomplished woman. I'll just cover a couple of the highlights. She is our Dean of Matriculation, Early Assessment, Student Leadership, and Administration for the Chancellor's Office for all 112 colleges. She's responsible for overseeing and administering $48 million in student success and support program funding for our 112 colleges, and for implementing the Student Task Force recommendations and the policies for the new Student Success Act. She's a very busy woman. But I'll tell you the reason I am so excited about having her here today is Aidan had mentioned about change. And I'm a little ambivalent about change. Sometimes I really like it because I know ultimately it's really good for growth. If we don't change and grow, we stagnate and die, and it's critical if we want to continue to be vital and alive. But we also know that change is hard. I don't always handle it as well as I'd like to. Sometimes we get a bit freaked out by it. I think all of us are sitting wondering, what's going to happen to me? Of course it's about our students, but really literally what's going to happen to me in all of this and my job and how it's going to impact what I do every day. I met Sonia within the last year or so. I'd attended some of the counselor advisory meetings there in Sacramento that she was co-chairing. And I was taken not only by how competent she is. I mean, you can tell her knowledge runs very deep. But the part that really struck me was she really inspired confidence in me. And I thought, somehow in this time of change, the one thing we really need is a leader that can inspire us. So that's why I wanted her to come and share with you today her perspective on what's going on and how it's going to really lay out for all the rest of us. And I'm so pleased she's taken the time, because she's an extremely busy woman, and this is really special that she's able to be with us today. So Sonia, on that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, I just want to thank Rita for inviting me today to talk with you about, I think, some very important work that's happening at the state level and around the state through our community colleges around student success. Rita, thank you so much for that very generous and kind introduction. I can tell you, as we've talked about student success at the Chancellor's Office and seen the work of the Student Success Task Force, I've been excited about the potential for reforms in our system. Working in student services, oftentimes student services is the afterthought. When a lot of budget cuts happen in our system, in 2009-10, matriculation suffered a 52% loss of funds. We went from 101 million to about 48 million statewide. What happened on our colleges statewide? We lost a lot of our counseling faculty, adjunct faculty. We lost a lot of the critical student support services throughout the system. When I came on board with matriculation, my boss, Linda Michalowski, said, we have to resurrect matriculation. This is the heart of what we do in our community college system for student services. And we were in a period of mourning. But the reality was that regardless of what was happening in our state, regardless of the budget climate that we were in and the challenges we were facing, students were still coming to our doors, right? We still have that obligation to serve our students and to do the best that we can with the resources that we have. And in some cases, we're going to have to be challenged to think about how we might do things differently. And so I think the Student Success Act accomplished quite a lot of different things. And one thing was to elevate the importance of the student services we provide, right? How many of you on your campuses have been talking about the Student Success Act and what's going on with student success? Just a show of hands. That's pretty amazing, don't you think? That all of a sudden now folks are coming into student services and saying, how can we do this? And you guys are the experts. You're the practitioners. And my hope is that we'll be ready with ideas. How can we make this work? With a lot of change, I think it's really easy to look at change and say, and think about all the reasons why it can't work, right? But the challenge for all of us is to find the ways that it can, okay? And with the expertise that you have, I think we can do that. So today I'm going to talk about the Student Success Act of 2012. And in particular, I'm going to be focusing on the student services related provisions of the task force recommendations from the Student Success Task Force. I'm going to focus on, because of the role that you play on your campuses for career counseling, advising, as career counselors and professionals, I'm going to focus specifically on the career-related provisions in the bill. And I'm going to also talk with you about how we're trying to rethink student services in our system. And so we'll go through a lot of what's happening in the world of assessment, counseling, advising, technology solutions. We also want to talk about the opportunities as career counselors and professionals that you'll have to engage in the Student Success Initiative on your campuses, because I think you'll play a very important role in the next several months. And hopefully, too, this just won't be me talking up here. My hope is that we'll have a dialogue about what this means. And really, we're here to listen to those ideas that you might have on how do we make this work. Before I go any further, any thoughts, or is there anything that you say, you'd like me to make sure I address at this point? No? Okay. Coffee hasn't kicked in. That's okay. All right. One of the first questions I often get about the Student Success Initiative is, how does this all fit with the Student Success Task Force recommendations, right? We have 22 recommendations from the task force. Just as a quick background, the Student Success Task Force was convened in 2011 as a result of Senator Liu's bill in 2010. Her bill sought to implement performance-based funding in our system. There's been a long concern that we fund our campuses based on seat time, right? After they pass census, how many students are still sitting in their seats. And the legislature had a proposal to fund us on completion. How many students do we get who finish their courses successfully? And at the time, Chancellor Jack Scott said, wait a minute, let our system look at student success and completion. Let us develop the agenda, and let us bring our stakeholders who have the expertise to try and come up with these ideas. Let us explore performance-based funding, rather than having someone in the legislature tell us and mandate something that might not work and actually might cause harm to some of our colleges. And so Senator Liu said, okay, we'll give the community colleges a chance. And she amended her bill, and then the bill became requiring the Board of Governors to establish a Student Success Task Force. That work started in 2011. The board convened a 20-member task force. And at the end of 2011, after this task force listened to all the latest research on what works for students, the task force came up with 22 recommendations. Of those 22 recommendations, I can tell you about 18 of them are actively being implemented today. And this week, to a lot of fanfare, the Chronicle of Higher Education, I don't know if you read all these articles that are coming out on the scorecard. Have you had a chance to take a look at the scorecard? Huge nationally, has garnered a lot of attention because of the level of transparency that provides on how well our students are performing. And not just focusing on completion, but momentum point measures, and not just looking at success in the aggregate, but disaggregating that data by ethnicity, gender, age, so that we're actually taking a close look at what's happening with our most vulnerable student populations. So this week, the Student Success Scorecard came out, and that was one of the recommendations. But as we look at the Student Success Initiative, what I can tell you is that we have the pieces of mandated services. The task force in recommendation 2.2 said that students coming into our system, many universities across the nation and community colleges require students to complete orientation, assessment, and have education plans in place before they start. And in community colleges, while our colleges are required to provide these services, our students weren't required to complete them. And so mandating the core services that have shown to help provide a good foundation for student success is one of those recommendations. Having students, and this I think is the critical in the role that you'll play in informing the dialogue on your campuses, but having our students declare a program of study early, right? Students who have a goal are more likely to reach that goal than students who come term after term after term and enroll in courses without a sense of where they're going. So we're going to have to rethink our concept of open access, right? There's been a lot of studies that have shown that while we have said open access is a fantastic thing, and it is, it's something that we should be very proud of as a system, what we have done through open access is provided kind of an endless myriad of options to students, and they've gotten lost in the detail. And so how can we provide more opportunities for structured exploration? How can we provide better guidance when students come in so they're not enrolling in classes that aren't going to get them anywhere? You know, how can we provide an opportunity for more thoughtful and mindful exploration early on so they can get to identifying their goal sooner rather than later? And so I think that'll be a very important place for the conversations you have on your campus about how do we structure that early? How do we think about that in terms of pre-enrollment services and even, you know, post-enrollment? When a student comes in, they enroll first term, even the second term. We're going to talk about some of the proposals that are going to be posted today on our website, and we'll make that available to you, about the changes in Title V, about where we're going to kind of put those lines in the sand as far as a policy framework about when we're going to have students be required to identify a course of study, when will they be required to have a comprehensive ed plan, and so we'll go through those details today. A lot of these conversations are moving forward fairly quickly, and so I think one of the things that we are trying to do is to make sure we're communicating these changes. What are these proposals? And then making sure that we're engaging our practitioners to help shape these policies as they're moving forward. The other pieces of the Student Success Initiative are the scorecard, the BOG fee waiver academic conditions. That's going to be going to our board probably this July. Other pieces also include the repurposing of the state matriculation program, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So September 27th, Governor Brown signed the Student Success Act of 2012. And really fundamentally, the Student Success Act is about repurposing the state matriculation program. And it also includes the BOG fee waiver, adding academic conditions to the BOG fee waiver program. So of the 22 recommendations, the Student Success Act is implementing several recommendations. It lays the groundwork for the first steps to implement 2.2 mandated services. So it calls for the Board of Governors to establish a policy for when students would be required to complete orientation, assessment, and have education plans in place. It also lays the groundwork for the board to set policy through Title V. So in recommendation 2.5, to have students declare a course of study early. In the task force recommendation, they called it program of study. And as the bill was moving through the legislature, there were a lot of conversations with faculty, and they said, you know, in our system, it should be course of study, so we did a name change. But essentially, it's the same, to declare a course of study early, which is the major, the program, whether the student is here to complete an ESL course sequence or basic skills, to declare that early so that we can help them reach their goal. The BOG fee waiver. Now, in the task force recommendation, it had three elements. There was the academic conditions, and it was based on Title V standards for academic and progress probation. So we weren't going to try and create new standards, but just base it what was in Title V already. And it included a unit cap limit of 90 or 100, as well as whether students were meeting their educational goal or making progress in meeting their education plan. As the bill moved through the legislature stripped out the unit limit. There's no unit limit for the BOG fee waiver in SB 1456, nor is there any condition that the student have to make progress toward their educational goal. Those things were stripped from the bill. So what we only have are the academic conditions, and that is that a student who's earned more than 12 units, that they not fall below a 2.0, or 50% completion, so they can't have withdrawn from more than 50% of the units they've enrolled in. 8.2 is the big one for matric. That was the repurposing of the state matriculation program, and we're going to talk about matric of 1986 in the last 20-some years, and then what are the changes that are going to be happening with matriculation moving forward. And then, one of the things that we always need to clarify is that we're not starting from nothing with the Student Success Act. We had an appropriation, or we have an appropriation of $48 million annually for matriculation services. We're starting from that point. And when colleges, and it's always a choice, if colleges want to receive their allocation for matriculation funding, then they would have to adopt the Student Success Scorecard. And what that means is that now that it's been publicly released, your districts have to agendize it at one of their board meetings and then have it publicly discussed. And that's what it means to adopt the Student Success Scorecard. And then at a point in time when we have a system of centralized assessment for English, math, and ESL, if your college uses standardized assessments for placement, then the college would be required to adopt the system centralized assessment. Now in this case, the question I often hear is, well, when? That we've been talking about this for the last several years. And I can tell you that all the homework has been done. A couple years ago, we engaged faculty across the system, our assessment professionals, matriculation professionals, and we said, what would be the ideal system of assessment for California's community colleges? And we came up with all of these required elements and then kind of the nice to haves. We heard clearly from our faculty that they wanted to see more of a diagnostic system of assessment. And so we've done kind of all the homework to lay the groundwork for what we would have to issue would be a request for proposal in order to do a competitive bid process to select a vendor to build that system for us. The only caveat is we don't have the money. It would cost us about $10 million to build this centralized system of assessment. Now, the other question, and so, we have gone to the legislature and asked for this. Now, at some point, my hope is that we're going to get it, and then we're going to be able to just move forward fairly quickly, I think. But there's still a commitment to move in that direction. The other question I get is it going to cost us anything? And the idea is that it would be additive funding, right? So we are asking for the legislature to give us money to do this. The idea being that then our colleges would use it at no cost or very low cost, so that it would free up other resources on your campus so that you could dedicate it to counseling and advising, orientation, and other supports to help our students succeed. Before I go any further, any questions, just kind of on the big macroscopic view of the changes? Okay, all right. So here's kind of a snapshot of, of the changes. Matriculation now in state law is called the Student Success and Support Program. And just kind of some background on that. Every time there was a downturn in the state economy and there was budget cuts in our system, and matriculation was always disproportionately cut compared to any other program that we have in our system. And there was always a discussion that folks just didn't understand across the street in the legislature what matriculation meant. It was just easy for them to cut it because they didn't understand it. And if you go and you look nationally, there's not really matriculation programs. There are the services, admissions records, counseling on all, when you look at the 4-year institutions and 2-year institutions. But the idea that we have kind of a matriculation program is something that is unique to California community colleges. In any case, over the years, there's been a lot of discussion about, well, shoot, we should do a name change. If they don't understand us, how else might we call ourselves so that they understand what it is that they're cutting when it comes time to do that? Well, we had an opportunity to do that. And when the bill was introduced, we had an opportunity to come up with some language to help the bill move forward. And we did it as a placeholder Student Success and Support Program. I thought someone would come up with a better name, and it didn't happen. And so that actually stuck. So we are now the Student Success and Support Program. We've gone from, in matriculation of 1986, having 8 funded components to targeting funding to the core. Okay, when in 2010, after the budget cuts hit, and we were in that state of mourning I was talking to you about, we convened our matriculation advisory committee and we did a strategic planning effort. And we said, if we had to save something with matriculation, what would we do? You know, what would we focus this on? If we had an opportunity to try to restore these services and make a case for it. And through that strategic planning effort, they said the core. Focus on the core. Counseling and advising to help our students develop ed plans, orientation, and assessment. And so we had that opportunity with the Student Success Task Force and now through SB 1456 to do just that. So now funding is targeted to these core areas. I'm calling it 3.1 though, because what the bill also says is that funding can also be used and needs to be used to help support at-risk students. So when we think about all of these other reforms, when we think about kind of the puzzle pieces I was talking about earlier, we had the BOG fee waiver changes that are coming, right? For federal financial aid, Cal grants, there's always been academic conditions. For the BOG fee waiver program, there were never any academic conditions. Now that's going to be new. And in that section of the bill, it says that if students are at risk of losing their BOG fee waiver, the college not only needs to notify them in advance, but we need to also make sure that there's support services there to give them a chance to not lose their BOG fee waiver. The same with the enrollment priority. Okay, so that's how all these pieces fit together, because the Student Success and Support Program provides that foundation to make sure that we provide our students an opportunity to succeed. And so in the matriculation sections of the bill, funding is allowed to be used for those follow-up services for students who are at risk. Right, students who are undeclared, students who are on academic and progress probation and facing dismissal, and students who are enrolled in basic skills. There's a question back there. Oh. Okay, so the question that we got from our audience was whether funds could be used to support articulation with the high schools. And what I can tell you is that how many of your colleges are doing like early bird programs, early start programs, where they're going out into the high school and doing matriculation services in the high schools? Okay, that's shown to be very, very effective. Those kinds of strategies can still continue. And in fact, through the funding model that's being proposed for the allocation of funds, it would incentivize those kinds of strategies. Because that's important, right? As we think about how we serve our students, we have to think about how we're linking with K-12 and how we're helping those student transitions as they're coming from the high schools. Okay. So 3.1. So it's really, targeting services to the 3, but the 0.1 is really the making sure that we are providing supports to our at-risk students. Okay. So in the matric of 1986, our colleges have long been required to provide orientation, assessment, ed planning, counseling and advising services to students. But in the Ed Code and in Title V, our students weren't required to complete it, right? And you saw that probably happening in your classes. I remember when I looked at our assessment data, and I said, okay, let me look at all the percentages of students who get assessed and where they place, and then how many students our colleges are exempting from assessment. And I added up those percentages, and I said, well, that doesn't add up to 100%. There were still about 30% of students that didn't get an exemption, didn't get assessed, and then I looked further and I said, they're still enrolling. Well, they're enrolling because we have a lot of classes that don't have prerequisites. And they can go, I was talking to Aiden about this. I said, how is this happening? He goes, well, students can come in for years and take classes without ever having to take a course that they would have had to assess into or meet the prerequisite. And I thought, wow, I had no idea. What changes with SB 1456 is now that the mandate will also fall on the student. And in a little bit, I'll talk to you about the implementation work groups that we convened and where the thinking is on where those timelines would fall for students to have to complete these services. And then what are the incentives and consequences if they don't? Okay. We've long been accused of being overly bureaucratic, right? Does anybody disagree? You guys are all silent. Nobody wants to make me feel bad. Okay, all right. Okay, well, I think we've earned that. One of the things we've done is, we program plan our colleges to death, right? And oftentimes it's like, well, how come we have to do a program plan here and it's not connected to the program plan over there? We really should be coordinating these efforts together. And so we're trying to rethink that. And so in the bill language, you'll see that we actually inserted language that as we do these new student success and support program plans, that we have to link with the student equity plan. And my colleague, Dr. Deborah Sheldon, is leading that effort for the student equity work group that we just launched on March 1st. But we are going to try to be very mindful about how we're linking all of these respective program planning processes to make sure that they're coordinated and it all kind of fits within the bigger picture and umbrella of the student success agenda. And then recently, we've been talking with our BSI coordinator, Basic Skills Initiative coordinator, to also look at how we can link with BSI. So we want to be a lot more thoughtful about our planning. But what we also want to do is, if we don't need to collect it, then we shouldn't. So kind of the thought of, well, let's just collect a bunch of data, but if in the last 20 years we never used it or it was never really reported well, we shouldn't collect it. Frankly, we don't have the staffing at the Chancellor's office to review all that. So we want to be very careful about what it is that we're asking. We want to collect what we need to be able to advocate across the street to the legislature about the importance of the services that we provide to our students, the outcomes, right, the effectiveness of these services in helping increase student success, and to be able to tell the story of community colleges. Nothing more than that. And so you're going to see that we're trying to look at the regulations and we're trying to streamline them, but we're also trying to look at the data elements that we collected and we're deleting things that we just want to focus on what we absolutely need. So that's our goal, is to reduce bureaucracy. In the past, how many of you have looked at your matriculation data on your colleges, for your colleges? Okay, how many of you think it's fantastic? Nobody. All right, good, because it's not. The reality is there are some colleges that are showing that they're not doing any counseling and advising or doing any ed plans. Now, I don't think that's true, but at the state level, when that data gets reported to our colleges, this is what we see. Nothing's happening. And in part, what we have found in the last 20 years, so we have an opportunity through the Student Success Act to rethink what worked from the 1986 policies, and we have an opportunity to think about what didn't, and we have an opportunity to change it. And what did work, we have an opportunity to increase, keep it and strengthen it. Well, we funded colleges for matriculation services based on population data only. Your enrollment of new and continuing students. That was it. Didn't matter how well you did the services or how many students you served. The money went out to campuses on population only. So what the Student Success Act does is it changes it, and it says, you know what? Fund on the potential population, right? So the population of students that you have at your campus, but you also need to factor in services provided. Now we think our data problems are going to be fixed. Because if you if you tie money to data, I think our colleges are going to make probably a Herculean effort in the next year and a half to make sure that we are capturing the services that we provide to our students. Now that's going to help us too when we have to go back across the street to the legislature to tell their story about the effectiveness of these services, because ultimately we have to be able to be responsive and say that this investment of state taxpayer dollars in matriculation services and these student supports makes a difference. And having data to be able to demonstrate that is critical. So as we move forward, and you're going to be able to see the new funding model that's being proposed in the next, actually it's going to consultation next week, but it's going to have three elements essentially: headcount, services provided, as well as the match. We have a question back there.
I apologize if this is out of context, but my understanding is adult ed is no longer going to be under the K-12 umbrella and it's moving to the community colleges. And I'm wondering or do you know if adult ed is going to be under some separate umbrella in terms of the community colleges than the general public?
Okay. So there was a question from the audience about the governor's proposal to shift adult education from K-12 to the California community colleges, and to do so at a much lower funding rate than K-12 had been historically funded to do. That proposal right now is being debated in the legislative process through the budget hearings. We've not really planned around that because nothing's been finalized. Nothing's been written in concrete about whether even that'll happen. But there's long been an interest and a recognition that when all of these budget cuts started happening, and in K-12 they block granted many of the programs that they had, including adult ed, based on that the block granting and the categorical flexibility that they implemented. Adult ed went from a funding level of $900 million statewide to $300 million, and many districts ended up, school districts, want to clarify, ended up getting out of the adult ed business altogether. And so I think at the state level there's a recognition that we have a huge gap. We have students who are, whether they left high school and they didn't finish their educations, that there's gaps in the training needs and the education needs that we somehow need to provide to our adult students, our adult learners. So that conversation is still happening. So what we've done in thinking about the Student Success Act and how we implement SB 1456 is we recognize that that's out there and we're going to have to address it if the legislature and the governor end up moving adult ed to community colleges, but that still hasn't been decided. Okay, so data, we think it's going to be fixed. And then when we talk about institutional outcomes, we have the scorecard. And when we've talked with our student service colleagues, many would say, gosh, you know what didn't work with Matric of 1986 in the last several decades was that there was such an emphasis on Matric as being the magic bullet, right? We will deliver students who are going to be successful into the classes, right? And that there needed to be a focus on the reality that student services alone can't guarantee student success. It's an institutional responsibility that we can only do so much on the student service side, but ultimately it's what happens in the classroom, right? It has to be a partnership between instruction and student services, and that the responsibility for student success is not borne on student services alone. It's the institutional responsibility, and the scorecard helps set or frame that dialogue, right? So now it's the institutions are being held accountable to the completion and momentum metrics that the scorecard has in place. And so the focus is on the institutional outcomes, and then hopefully student service, not hopefully, student services is a part of that, making it happen, but also it's instruction. So some of the key requirements, yes, in the back. Okay, so the question was about the funding model. I have a chart on that, so I'm going to go into it in detail. And you're going to be one of the early audiences to hear about what's being proposed as it's moving to consultation next week. But essentially it's headcount plus services provided plus a match requirement. Okay. So, I'm not going to walk through all of the bill language, but I'm going to highlight some of the key areas of the bill. One is the bill requires, for the student services piece of it, for the Student Success and Support Program, the bill requires that the Board of Governors adopt a policy to mandate orientation, assessment, and education plans for students, to also delineate a policy on exemptions and the appeal process for students. SB 1456 also calls for the Board of Governors to adopt a new funding model. I mentioned that earlier. And as well as the BOG fee waiver changes. Now on the BOG fee waiver changes, group was convened, I think it was last June, and it's met several times. There is a draft proposal, and they're on track to have the proposal go to the Board of Governors probably for July. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the BOG fee waiver changes because that discussion is still moving forward. But essentially, it would tie the BOG fee waiver, the academic condition standards, to the enrollment priority standards, the same academic and progress probation standards that exist in Title V. Okay. What I do want to focus on with you today are those sections of the bill that really highlight the importance of career exploration, of having our students identify a career goal. That's new. And the having students to explore their interests, career interests, and more broadly, as we look at planning within our system, that we need to look not just within our colleges, but how we partner with K-12 and maybe workforce boards in order to help leverage the resources and work that they're doing to help our students with that career exploration and identifying what their interests are earlier. Okay, so something that's new, and it's been hotly debated. Folks keep asking me, like, why is this in the bill? But what was always in matriculation was that students had to identify an education goal upon application. So what's new is that students not only have to identify an education goal when they apply, but they also now have to identify a career goal. Okay. Now the question I often get is, well, that's not going to be very meaningful because a lot of students don't know what they want to do when they come to us. But think of it in terms of this. We get that. I know my son, I have 4 boys, right? And I kind of consider them my little experiment because they're moving through the pipeline. I've got one kindergartner. Right now he's being Common Core'd to death with the new Common Core state standards in kindergarten. I got a kindergartner, I have a 4th grader, I have a 7th grader, and I have a freshman in high school. So when I talk about college readiness, I think my kids are probably on overload. They're probably, oh no, Mom. But what I can tell you is my 7th grader, for a couple years, he said he wanted to be an attorney. And he was like, he loves to argue. And he can be very persuasive. And I thought, wow, that's probably his niche. And then he met an attorney and he decided last week he didn't want to be an attorney. And then he told me, because they started doing career exploration in his middle school, and he said, you know what, it's too early for me to figure out my career, Mom. He goes, I don't understand why they're pushing me this early. And I said, no, I get that, Mijo. I said, but you need to be thinking about what your interests are. And I started talking to him about, think about those subjects that really resonate with you. What are the things that, you really enjoy when you're in your studies? And he said, well, I really like history. I said, okay, well, you don't have to be a historian. I said, but, think about those things that you really like, and then we can explore, different types of options, But I said, really what they want you to do is just think about what you might be interested in and set goals for yourself. And so it was kind of interesting just to have these conversations with my 7th grader. Now, my freshman in high school, he says he wants to be an engineer. Who knows whether that'll happen. But hopefully his aspirations will match what he's doing, right? Because sometimes, you can say, I want to be, I remember I went out to one high school and a student said, didn't do well academically, but was graduating and was just meeting the minimum requirements. And I said, so where are you planning to go? I'm going to go to Sac City. Okay, great. And what is it that you want to do? I'm thinking about being a beautician or a pediatrician. And I said, okay, wow. I said, well, what did you take in high school? Not very much math, not beyond Algebra 2, for sure. Just met the minimum math requirement. And I thought, wow, we have to do a better job about messaging to students about what it means to be prepared for college. And not just college, community college, because there's a misconception out there, and that is that students don't have to do anything to be prepared to go to community college. And that's not true. Rita, can I get a glass of water? Okay. So we have some work to do. And I think that's where you can have an important role. How do we get students to think about career exploration and exploring their interests early? Now, we know students are going to change their mind. I know I changed my mind. I went to UC Santa Cruz and I said, I want to be a doctor. And I was a bio major. and I'm here today, not a doctor. And then I thought I was going to be an attorney, and I didn't do that either. So I changed my mind several ways. So I think we get that. I think there's a fear from our students and then from folks on our campuses that all of a sudden we think that students can't change their mind. That's not the case. The idea is, how do we help students with exploration? How do we help students identify a goal? How do we help students make progress towards that goal? How do we do that earlier, right? So we're trying to build in a lot of the policies that we're putting out there in the next couple weeks a framework that would allow for that. In any case, career goal. And in this case, we are working with the CCC Apply Steering Committee. The thinking on career goal is that when students apply, we're going to link it to the ONET classifications of industries and occupations. And students could either, this is the concept, students could either identify a broad industry area that they're interested in, or, you know, if they know, like my son, I want to be an engineer, he could actually go down and maybe drill down and say, this is what I want to be. There's a fear that, well, you know, students change their mind. You know, hopefully this is not going to set us up for being accountable for whether a student gets a job in that area. And the answer is no. Because oftentimes students will get a degree in something that is not related to what they end up ultimately doing. I ended up majoring in psychology. I'm not a psychologist. So, so not only are students declaring a career goal, but the idea, most importantly, was that would help inform their course of study. And that they can change their mind. Okay, a couple questions in the back.
When you say we are going to connect it to ONET, who is we?
Oh, okay. So when we say who's connecting it to ONET, who's we? So that's the Chancellor's Office, as they work with the Butte Technology Center to implement the changes to CCC Apply. They're going to do that. Yeah, it's the universal we, right? Okay. Okay, so then there's funding also. Part of the bill language says, and this is where there's, you know, kind of a heightened recognition about the idea that, you know, it's not just assessment, and when we talk about counseling and advising, that we really, you know, we need to look at how we help our students explore their interests. And this, again, is an area where I think that you're going to play a very important role. And so funding through the Student Success and Support Program shall focus on counseling and other education planning services. From our counselors, how many of you are general counselors? Okay. There's a fear, and it's a palpable anxiety about that maybe counseling is at risk, right? And I get that because, you know, I know from the budget cuts that we've suffered, our counselors took a huge hit on our campuses. But the idea is when funding comes in, it's additive. We're not planning, you know, we know that counselors play an important role in this conversation. No one's trying to get counselors out of the equation. It's how do we do counseling and how do we make sure that we're serving the broad array of students who come through our system. And so our hope is that we know we need more counselors, but we also know that we have to think broadly about the solutions in serving our students. So it's counseling and advising and maybe some technology solutions to help our students, because even when you think about the numbers, 2.4 million students, we know that we can't do it through one way only. And in fact, I remember we had on our advisory committee for matriculation and one of the SB 1456 implementation groups, we had a student who was talking to us, and he said, look, he goes, you know, I know some of my friends needed to see a counselor to figure out what it is to do that they needed to transfer. He goes, I'm going to UC Davis next year. I've been accepted. He goes, I used Assist, and I figured out what I needed to do, and I did it. So I would challenge us to make sure, and he goes, please don't create barriers for students like me who can do it on our own. Please don't treat us all as one and the same. You know, oftentimes when we have a conversation, you know, we talk about recognizing the diversity of our students ethnically, right? But what about in capabilities as well? It can't be a one-size-fits-all approach in our strategy. All students have to do it this way only. That's not what you see nationally. When you look at the two-year schools and the universities, California Community Colleges is unique. We've kind of created some structures in how we serve students that don't exist anywhere else in the nation. So I would challenge us to think about, how do we approach this? A, thinking about what's in the best interest of students first. What does the research say works? And then build processes around that. So in the case of SB 1456, it's counseling and when new funding comes in, it's additive, because we know that we have to bring more counselors to the table because we lost quite a lot of counselors and we were hit with all these budget cuts. It's also funding to make sure that we can help our students to explore their educational and their career interests and their aptitudes. Although someone tells me that aptitudes is not a word that's used anymore. But anyway, that was in the bill. It's to make sure that when we think about education planning, that it's informed by sound counseling practices and principles, but that it also, when we think about ed planning, that it's tied to a student's academic and their career goals to help them move forward and achieve their academic and career goals at college. About leveraging local partnerships. So you're going to see language in the bill that talks about the importance of being able to work with K-12, the school districts, and with workforce partnerships in your region, to be able to talk about and maybe leverage resources when it comes to education planning, career exploration, and helping students identify a goal. And so that's actually part of the planning process. Colleges will have to put that in their plans, to the extent that you have partnerships in place that you can leverage. On assessment is broadly defined in the bill, but it also talks about assessment of vocational career aptitude and interest inventories. We should be able to support that because we know that our students have to explore careers in order to be able to figure out what it is that they want to do. I had mentioned earlier, so I want to put a caveat. I know our data is bad, okay? But when we looked at our data for 2009-10, at the height of matriculation funding, right, we found that about a third of our students in our system were reported as having seen a counselor, and of that third, only 19% were recorded as having an ed plan. So I thought, okay, let's drill down further. For the 19% that did get an ed plan, I wonder if we're going to see disproportionate impacts, because I thought first-generation students probably wouldn't know to avail themselves or how to navigate life on campus and make sure to seek out those counseling and advising services. But you know what? It was interesting to me. The students who had ed plans were students coming from our categoricals, EOPS, CalWorks, DSPS, and Puente, and I thought, oh, well, they're doing a great job because, they're making sure, I didn't see the disproportionate impact that I thought I would see, because I thought I would see a disproportionate number of African American Latino students not accessing the services. And when we looked at our data, that wasn't the case. And I think our categoricals do a wonderful job of creating that level playing field. But even when you look at a third of our students having seen a counselor and advisor, or 19%, and I know those numbers are low, but I don't think they're going to be much higher when you think about 2.4 million students. What happens to all the other students who don't get to see somebody? How many, for you on your campuses, how many, where you have students who sit in long lines just to try and ask a simple question? We have to think about not the quantity of the service, but the quality of the interaction. How do we get our counselors from being an information unloading, right? Students come in and it's, here's everything you need to know to be successful. Here's your education. And then the student feels overwhelmed. But how can we rethink things where we have students own some of that process, right? They need to come prepared. They need to do some homework before they come into that appointment so that our counselors aren't having to, use that session in a way that's just kind of, here's the information, but how do you use it and apply it, rather? How do we change that interaction? So that's a challenge for, I think, us as a system. But as we think about how we serve students, we know that in Los Rios, the 900 to 1 counselor to student ratio is something that is heralded as the model around the state. If we were to try and accomplish that for all of our colleges, we would need another $300 million to reach that ratio. Now, if we wanted to make sure that 2.4 million students saw a counselor to have a 30-minute appointment for an ed plan, we would need $1 billion to do that. That's not going to happen. So we have to think about how we do these services in a different way. We have to think about how we triage. For students that need the higher touch, we need to be able to identify them early and provide that to them, but we need not to treat all of our students as if everybody needs that. We need to be able to teach some of our students to fish, and some students want that. I mentioned the program plan and the fact that we're going to have our colleges talk about these broader partnerships and how we can leverage those resources to help support the delivery of these services. And here's kind of just the framework of, so SB 1456 was signed in September, and then in November we moved quickly to launch several work groups to implement the provisions of the bill. And predominantly we had an early work group tasked with rewriting Title V, the matriculation regs on Title V. We had another work group looking at the data elements that we collect for matriculation to make sure it aligns with SB 1456, and also to create a new funding formula. Those work groups met over the course of the last 5 to 6 months and have completed their work. We now have proposals drafted that are going to be shared for broad input by our system stakeholders, and we'll be moving to Consultation Council on April 18th next week. We're going to be posting all of this material and sharing it on all of our listservs today. And so we'll make sure that, and I'll make sure I send Rita a copy so that you can see what those proposals look like. But I am going to talk to you about and share with you the concepts that are moving forward in those proposals. As I had mentioned, we did launch a student equity group because as we think about all of these reforms, we were very intentional in wanting to insert equity into that conversation. Because when we think about all the changes that are happening, we have to make sure that we are being mindful of the impacts to our students and that we're disaggregating that data. And so we wanted to make sure that we were integrating the student equity planning process in this process as well. Here's the timeline. You can't turn a ship around on a dime, especially in our system. Change takes years, sometimes decades. We talk about the same thing for quite a long time. And I will grant you that in recent years, change has come pretty fast in our system, right? The task force said, let's do enrollment priorities, and a year later we had enrollment priorities. That's phenomenal pace of change for our system, for anyone who's worked in community colleges or in higher education. I think that's just higher education. Change doesn't happen quickly. But when you look at how we're implementing this bill, we wanted to make sure that we were providing kind of a thoughtful timeline and a reasonable timeline. So we looked at 2012-13 as the state planning year, where the governor signed the bill, we're rewriting Title V, we're coming up with a new funding formula, we're redoing our data elements, and then this summer, in July, we'll release all of this to our colleges and say, okay, now 13-14 is your planning year. This is where you'll need to convene your advisory committees, and you'll need to discuss the program plan requirements and how you're going to meet the new requirements of the Student Success Act on your campuses. My hope is this is where you're going to have an important role in shaping that dialogue on your campuses as we move into 13-14. What we also said is, even though SB 1456 went into effect on January 1st, we didn't target the funding in this year. That would have been like a mid-year change and it would have been a mess. What we said is we're going to target starting July 1st, 2013 to the core services. And we're going to hold colleges funding the same. You're not going to see any, unless, and I'm hopeful, that we may receive an augmentation in funding for the new budget year. There's a lot of advocacy going on right now to invest in the Student Success Initiative, and so my hope is that we'll see that happen. So that would be the only change, would be a positive change, that you might get more money to do this work moving into the new year, which I think would be fantastic. So 13-14 is the district planning year. 14-15, colleges would submit their plans and their budgets to our office. Hopefully your colleges have programmed those changes, right? Because we're going to be looking at, after every term, the data that your colleges submit to make sure that no one's reporting 0 for student ed plans and no one's reporting no counseling contacts. Because in 15-16, we're going to fund based on the new allocation formula. Head count and services provided. So 2.5 years. Now, as far as what the policy work group is recommending, because the question I get is, when will these student mandates go into place, right? When are colleges going to have to do this? And what the work group said was, let's give our colleges an opportunity to ramp up, right? And so fall 2015 is the goal when those requirements would go into effect, with a student notification requirement in spring 2015. Okay. Any thoughts on the timeline? Okay. All right. So as far as the policy proposals that are moving forward, next week, the proposals that have been drafted are going to consultation. Chancellor Harris is interested in having it go to a first reading for our board in May. May 6th is when it might be agendized. And so typically when we adopt new Title V regs, it's 2 readings. So first reading and public comment in May, with the board taking a vote in July. What changes might you expect? So for the data elements, I talked about the fact that now our colleges are going to have to collect career goal for students, and that's going to be a new data element altogether. We're changing SMO2, which was major, to now course of study. There's been a lot of conversation about how meaningless the ed goal is, that students just kind of select whatever is alphabetically at the top of the list, and it doesn't really reflect what their real education goal is. And we're changing it to say that that instead of just rolling over, because SB 14 is the data element for ed goal on the application, and oftentimes what we heard was that our colleges were just programming it so that whatever was put on the application got dumped into SMO1. So whether it was informed or whether the student had a chance to update it, it just simply kind of carried over term to term to term. So what we're saying is we want the student, and I think Los Rios has a model where they have, is it the supplemental or the supplemental enrollment form? So students are being asked, is this your ed goal? You know, and I think we need to keep asking our students, right? We need not let them come in and say, I'm an accounting major because that was the top of the list when I first applied and I had no idea what I wanted to do. But we need to ask them every term, or at least once a year, what's your ed goal? Is this still your ed goal? Because our ed goal data is horrible. And right now, when you look at the scorecard, it's not based on the ed goal. The scorecard is based on student behaviors. Did they attempt to transfer? If they said they were interested in transfer, did they attempt a transfer level course in, I forgot what the parameters are, but it's really looking at student behavior to identify whether students intend to transfer and whether they intended to complete a degree. And so what we need to do is do a better job with ed goal and make sure that students are given that opportunity to identify what that is and update it. There's an approach that is being promoted about using a more pathways approach. Let's not get into the nitty-gritty on the application. Let's just say, maybe think of broad pathways and let a student say, that, because that probably is more indicative of where students are at early on when they first enroll. But we didn't address that in these changes. We said we're going to have that discussion later. We are deleting some data elements that our colleges simply haven't reported very well, and frankly, we never did anything with at the Chancellor's office. Special service needs was one. Already on CCC Apply, students who want to access veteran services or any other special supports on our campuses, they say that on the application. And you can do outreach based on that. The idea that you're having to in turn report it again to our office didn't make sense. We said, you know what, that's something that can be locally handled, and you guys can do that. We don't need to see it. We are changing follow-up to academic progress probation. Remember I talked to you about those follow-up services and making sure that we're tracking students, especially when we think about some of these significant changes in the BOG fee waiver and enrollment priorities. If students are facing a loss of either, we need to make sure that we're providing them some kind of intervention to give them the opportunity to not lose it. There's going to be a new student education plan element and student success other, because there's a recognition that our colleges do quite a lot of work to help support student success, and we're not capturing that. And so you'll see that detail in there as well. Now with student ed plan, we're not talking about ed plan in everybody, right? We're talking about doing ed plans for students who need them, but we're also talking about making this a more meaningful process. So for our first-time students, and about 70% of students who come into our system are undeclared. They don't know what they want to do. Doing a comprehensive ed plan for the next 3 years or 2 years makes absolutely no sense. Anybody disagree with that? No. That's what our counselors told us, and we listened. And they said, and what we got from our counseling advisory group was, you know what? A one-term ed plan is really appropriate, 1 or 2 terms. When students come in, let's give them enough of a structure so that they can explore early on. And not kind of coming in and just selecting a bunch of courses that aren't going to get them anywhere, but let's give them enough guidance early on so that they can come in better informed and make better decisions. And a 1 or 2 term ed plan is probably just appropriate, the abbreviated ed plan, for students who are coming into our system and don't know what they want to do. And so we make a distinction between the comprehensive ed plan, which is once a student knows what they want to do, then you do the Cadillac plan. At that point, that's when you say, okay, term by term by term, this is how you're going to need to get to your goal. But not for every student coming in. That wouldn't make sense. So the new data element would capture both the abbreviated ed plan and a comprehensive ed plan. The changes that you're going to see in Title V that will be released today for review update a lot of language, adds new terms like course of study, the career goal as a concept. Frankly, there were old terms like computerized information systems. Back in 1986, computers were just coming online, right? It was like rare when somebody had the computer in your office and was doing word processing. Now, it's just a fact of life. And so we just call it simply technology. So, there's some updating of language like that. The program name obviously has changed from matriculation to Student Success Support Program. And then you're going to see that the funds will be targeted to the core, the 3.1 that I talked about, and you're going to see the new policies on mandated services for students. Now, what we're thinking about with mandated services is that the idea that students have an obligation and a responsibility to attend class, all students, is there. They have to do their coursework, whatever that is. That generally applies to all students. That's still in there. But first-time students, so as far as making this a reasonable phased-in approach for fall of 2015, first-time students, so new to you at your college, not concurrently enrolled high school students, not students who are transferring in from other colleges and universities, but new to you at your college. Those are the students that would be required to go through orientation, go through assessment, and have at least an initial education plan. Now, the requirement that students declare or identify a course of study and have that comprehensive ed plan in place would be at 15 degree applicable units. So excludes basic skills and ESL. 15 degree applicable units once a student has earned those units, or before the end of the 3rd term. The college has some flexibility to figure out, how they want to approach that. So in a lot of the work group conversations, it was like, okay, well, we don't want to do it by the end of the 1st term or even the 2nd term because sometimes students still need to figure it out. And then we have most of our students are part-time, not full-time. And so they thought that kind of those time frames would work. And then also, if we let the students get too far out there, then we kind of miss the opportunity to try and engage with them and have them declare that course of study early. So 15 degree applicable units or before the end of the 3rd term. And we're focusing on first-time students only for fall of 2015. Here's the funding formula. So part of this is we have an opportunity to think about, through funding, how we incentivize change in our system, right? So we're not going to fund on headcount only anymore. The work group came up with a 40-60 split. So if you think about the $38 million that we have for credit support services in our system, 40% of that would go to headcount. And colleges would get their prorated share based on the numbers of students enrolled at your college of that 40% of that $38 million. And then 60% of the state's appropriation for credit funding would go to the services provided at your college. Okay. The head count includes a base funding level of $35,000, and you'll be surprised to know that for some of our really small colleges, that's even more than they get right now. That's awful for credit matriculation. So $35,000 actually is a bump for them, but it's $35,000 or 10% of this total appropriation for credit funding. So let's say, hypothetically, if we get $40 million this incoming year, or $30 million, but let's say we get 40 and our credit allocation jumps to $70 million, the floor would raise to $70,000. Okay, so it protects our smaller colleges, right? Makes sure that they're guaranteed a minimum base funding level. But for our larger colleges, head count would account for the larger population of students that our larger colleges serve. Okay. Now, the total funding on that would not exceed 40% for head count. So, if you increase the base funding to $70,000 per college, that's still within that 40%. And the question in the back?
Yeah, a couple of questions. How will the comprehensive SEP be defined?
Okay. So in Title V, there's a definition of comprehensive SEP. And what we primarily did is we relied on the Academic Senate. They had a paper that was written called The Role of Counseling Faculty in the California Community Colleges. Is that right, Debbie? Something like that. And in it, they define a comprehensive ed plan. Now, we didn't put everything in the kitchen sink in there because we recognize that there are going to be differences among our colleges. We just kind of looked at the elements that would be common among all of our colleges. And so you'll see that defined in Title V in the proposal. Well, Ed Plan was never defined in Title V. Yeah, that's a change we're making. So what you're going to see in Title V in the proposal is that abbreviated Ed Plan is defined and comprehensive Ed Plan is defined. So abbreviated Ed Plan is defined as 1 or 2 terms, and it's appropriate for students for whom a comprehensive Ed Plan is not appropriate. A comprehensive Ed Plan, on the other hand, is more than 1 term, and it helps the student reach their goal. So you're going to be multiple terms in length to get them to their goal. It recognizes that for some students, maybe 2 terms is all they need for a comprehensive ed plan because they're here to maybe just complete a short-term certificate or program at our college. So we wanted to allow for that. But the comprehensive ed plan is not just a course schedule. It's more than that. What it is the referral to the support services on a campus. It includes the assessments results that the student has on file. It includes a much broader, richer guidance for the student.
The at-risk follow-up services and other follow-up, is that new in terms of the new early alert systems that are going to be implemented? Mm-hmm. Is that what those refer to?
So you can use funding for early alert systems, but if it's just if it's just an email that goes out to students, we're not talking about saying, okay, now everybody on your college gets counted. They've been early alerted. No. What we're saying is if the early alert results in some type of contact with somebody at your campus. So as a result of the early alert, the student has come in and met with an advisor or a counselor. We want to make sure, because that's what we want to fund, right? I mean, we're supporting, and you can use funding to do the early alert notifications, but the real work is in if that student actually does something and comes in and meets with someone on the campus. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so part of when we looked at the funding model, so on the services side, there was a recognition that okay, you know what? The task force recommendations focused on those entering services, orientation, assessment, and education planning. But the reality is that we just can't focus on the front end, right? If we're serious about helping our students meet those momentum points, the 30 units, 15 units, that we need to make sure that we're helping support our students along the educational pathway. And so the funding model, so you'll see 30%, and that's why it's double asterisk, focus on those initial services. But the remaining really focuses on services that could help, that a student would be able to see a counselor in other terms, beyond that first term. The comprehensive SEP, because of the importance and because of the task force recommendation to make sure that students had a plan to achieve their goal, you'll see that that was weighted more heavily. But we also wanted to make sure that we were incentivizing those at-risk follow-up services. And then other follow-up services is really student success other. So here's some thinking. Sometimes with orientations, we try to overwhelm students with, here's everything you need to know to be successful. But what if instead we approached it from bite-sized pieces? What do you need to know right now to be successful this term? And then maybe you get another orientation a term or two later for what you need to know to help keep you successful as you continue to move on your path. Right? So let's break it into manageable pieces. So the idea that we're going to front load everything, the funding model really supports funding across the pathway. And so you could do other orientations and get funded for that. You could do other assessments, career assessments, and get funded for that. A question in the back? And I think the other thing too is I know some colleges are talking about maybe having templates. So for the engineering students, maybe for abbreviated ed plan, maybe there's just what do engineering students need to know? So maybe start thinking about for the various programs at your campus. Is there a way to kind of have some initial guidance to get students off the ground? And then get them ready so that they can have a more meaningful dialogue in the appointments that they have later on. So that's going to be the challenge. We can't do this without you. And we certainly need your ideas on how we can achieve that. But the idea is that we need to rethink how we do it. The way that we've done it hasn't really worked that well, and a lot of students are coming into our system and aren't being served at all. And we have to change that. So you'll also see that the historical match of 3-to-1, Chancellor Harris made a decision this week that he wanted to maintain that historical match commitment on behalf. So for every dollar that a college gets for the student support program services, a college would have to match it with $3. And the idea there is that when Matric went into effect in 1986, there was a recognition that colleges were already providing institutional support services, that the institution was already obligated to and had a responsibility to provide student support services. Matric came into effect and it was supplemental funding. It wasn't intended to supplant what the institution was already doing. And at that point, I guess I wasn't there, but they looked at what institutions had already committed for student support services and they said a 3-to-1 match made sense. And Rita's probably telling me, hurry up. Okay, all right. So I'm almost at the end here. Oh, well, okay, so as we rethink services to students, here's some things for you to think about this afternoon. We need to improve our communication and messaging to students about college expectations and kind of those K-12 linkages and strategies that students need to succeed in college, habits of mind. Being college ready is more than just doing well on the standardized assessment, right? Standardized assessment only measure one aspect of a student's readiness for college. It's academic skills and knowledge. But I know my freshman in high school does really well on tests. Gate identified, standardized on his STAR test, test advanced, but he's super disorganized. So his GPA doesn't reflect his capability because time management, he's a huge procrastinator. And all the papers in his backpack, all on the bottom, not organized. Habits of mind play a critical role in whether a student succeeds in college. And so we know we have to think broadly about it, but we also need to communicate that to students. Life in college is much different than what it is in high school, where everything is kind of chunked out and students have an opportunity to redo homework and redo tests, and that doesn't happen in college. We need to help students with education and career planning early and helping them explore their interests. We need to think about things like Career Cafe, where they can do that even before they enroll, coming in, and then while they're here. We need to look at how we can help students declare a program of study early and develop their education plan so that they can achieve their goals. We need to look at how we partner with our workforce partners and colleges around the state. All the information I've talked to you today is on our website. We have a Student Success Act webpage. All the proposals that I highlighted today that are moving forward to consultation are going to be posted here, as well as we're going to send them out on our listservs. So if you would like to get copies of anything, of charts, you can go to the website to check it out. Thank you. All right.
That's great. I know our remote sites are feeling left out because they haven't had a chance to ask questions. So, David, is that something that they can do easily, or do we need to break in? Okay. I'm going to put you in charge of that then. Remote sites, if you have a question for Sonia, she's here with us for a little bit longer. What would that be?
Hi, Sonia. Thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to ask if there are plans to work within the Common Core and incorporate some of this planning that students need to have done before they enter into community college within the high school curriculum.
So the answer is, we actually, another work group, we've been busy work grouping people to death, I think. One of the work groups that we've also launched is a state level advisory committee on the Common Core and college and career readiness. We launched that February 28th. And one of the things we're trying to do is help inform Common Core implementation in our state and the new development of the new assessments. How many of your colleges are accepting EAP? Okay. So with the new Common Core assessments, we have about 75 colleges that actually have adopted EAP. EAP is not going away. It's going to be EAP 2.0 is what I'm calling it. So we're looking at how we can inform the development of those assessments. And then there's been a lot of conversation. So the Common Core integrates college and career readiness standards in each grade level, which is fantastic. There's a lot of conversations about how do we use that 12th grade year differently, and we're engaged in conversations with the State Department of Education on that, and I know the State Board is also very interested. I'm not sure if the bill is moving forward, but there has been consideration of maybe integrating kind of college knowledge into the high school curriculum. One of the things we've learned is if you do after-school workshops, students don't always attend. Even if you offer free iPods and say, hey, they still don't come. The opportunity we have is to think about how we integrate that in the curriculum. And so those discussions are going on.
Okay, do we have another question from our remote site? One of our remote sites.
Yes. Hi, Rita, this is Eileen O'Brien from San Mateo.
Good, you've got it, Eileen.
Oh, good, okay. One of the questions somebody here asked was about the use of advisors. what role they might play, how are they being defined as different from counselors?
Okay.
Because I know that was something that was brought up before, although not mentioned today.
Okay, that's a very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. So what I want to point out is, as we've thought about the new Title V language, so what we're putting into state law, we've been very careful to identify the what a college has to do, not the who and the how, right? And so it's really going to be up to the college to have those discussions about who provides these services. In Title V, we are not putting anything that says only certain groups of folks on a campus can do X. That really is left for the college to decide, to make sure that the needs of your students are being met on your campus. So what's going in Title V is only the what you got to do, not the how you do it or the who does it.
Good, thank you. Do we have one more question from one of our remote sites?
Go ahead.
I had actually two questions. One was related to the fee waiver, and you said that the unit cap and the following of the ed plan as conditions for the fee waiver has been removed from consideration. Is that consideration in the short run but could come back, or is that, should we move forward in plans on our campuses assuming that that's not going to be the case?
So this is only for the BOG fee waiver. So I just want to clarify that for enrollment priorities, the 100-unit limit is in place in Title V. And so are the academic standards that a student would have to meet to continue to receive enrollment priority. But for the BOG fee waiver, it's only the academic conditions that'll mirror what we have for enrollment priorities. And actually, the law was very specific. The legislature actually put language in the bill that says, and you can never put a unit cap in place. So it's not a short term. It's actually into perpetuity that we can't put a unit cap on the BOG fee waiver.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. My second question, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place to ask it, but I'll ask it anyway. On our campus, one of the things that we're doing towards orientation is considering a mandatory half-unit orientation course. And we've had a little bit of discussion at the academic senate level regarding whether that is allowed. Can we mandate an orientation course when students have to pay for that course? Yeah. Is that permissible? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. Did you send me the email? Somebody sent me an email about that, and I need to talk with our legal counsel to figure that one out. Now, the idea, because what I'm hearing a lot too is that there's concerns about the pressures of the 50% law and how our counselors are not on the right side of the law. One approach might be to explore, if our counselors did orientation courses, student success courses, they'd be on the other side of the law, right? They'd be kind of on the instructional side, which would relieve some of that 50% pressure. So we want to explore. We think that's a promising approach, and we know that colleges, I think Cabrillo College is one college that is also looking at doing that. So to the extent that we can do that. Now, whether we can mandate a student to take something that they have to pay for, that's something that we have to look into. So I think it's a great question. I'm glad that you raised it. I don't have the answer right now, though.
We're getting rid of a lot of our orientation to college courses and replacing them with the life and career planning.
Oh.
But I think that it's important that the students get the front end of the information to be successful,
right,
to go on to that, to the life and career planning class.
Right.
Just for those that are remote, they can't hear you. Yes, just so she's saying at Sac City, do I understand you're replacing your orientation with more life and career planning classes?
Private colleges do it, so I'm not understanding. Meaning require orientation when you enter their college.
Oh.
Many private colleges, it's you have to.
Oh.
Here's your money.
Yeah.
You have to do it every time.
Right.
So,
Repeat that.
Okay, so she asked, how are we doing this? How are we requiring students to do orientation, right? Well, I forgot. It's an important question because in Title V, the consequence and the incentive for not doing these things, there's a couple of things. It's tied to registration priority now. That's one incentive, right? Or consequence if they don't, because then they could lose registration priority. But the other is that a college, and we have colleges that have done this already. Riverside is one where they said if a student doesn't complete orientation, then they can't register for classes. So they put a hold. Now, Title V was written in a way that didn't really allow for that, but we're fixing that. So a college could do that. Now, we're not saying that all colleges should do that, but we are giving institutions the discretion to do that as one way of incentivizing it.
Okay, do we have one last question, either from the group here or remote? A burning question? Yes.
I wanted to know if the shift was moving from this open access idea, because a lot of the conversation is about high school students. And I know that in my college success classes, I have students who are as old as 60 that are first-time college students, and there's not a lot of conversation that I hear about strategies for students who are older, who are first-time, or maybe they took one semester 20 years ago and then they're coming back and they're just as lost. They're probably more lost than students coming out of high school.
Yeah.
In terms of student success.
Okay. So the question was, as we think about what's happening with open access and the appearance that we're moving away from our commitment to open access, that we are focusing more on students who are coming in from the high school. But what about for the majority of students who don't come to us right after high school? When you look at our data, most students, are in the, I think is it the 22 to 24. They're not coming to us right away. That's the bulk of our students. Now, there are a lot of things that also impact that, because we did see with all the course reductions and the budget cuts that first-time students weren't even getting access into classes because they simply didn't have registration priority, which is one reason why we did reg priorities, to allow for that pipeline to help support that. I will tell you, though, when you look at the policies that we're developing, we're not talking about high school. We simply say first-time student. Okay. So in the thinking is first-time student isn't only high school, recent high school graduate. It's students who are coming to us who maybe started and then they're returning, right? They decided it wasn't working for them. They really didn't know what they wanted to do. They come back 5 years later. But we're simply calling it first-time student, and it's not targeted to just our younger students. At the policy level, now what happens on the campus is different. So I just want to talk about when we write Title V, it's a policy framework with quite a lot of flexibility for our institutions to target the resources on the campus. But we don't want to forget about our older students on our campuses. I think your point is well taken.
Right. Thank you. Okay, if I have kind of a favor to ask, because we are running a little bit late and I know you need a break. What I request, because I really want to honor Sonia's time. I mean, she's extremely busy and has given us this, but I would love to have her stay for a little bit of the discussion around a couple of these questions. So how about if we would that be okay, a 15-minute break? But during that 15 minutes, would you be willing just to grab your coffee or whatever and go to the restroom, but come back to your table and look at question number 2 and 3. We're really only going to talk about those two today, because I think they're really critical ones that I would like Sonia to be able to hear our responses. This is our opportunity to give her some real ideas that she can take back and be able to hopefully be influenced in some way by that. I think we have a lot to offer as a group. So if you will take a 15-minute break, but be ready by 11 to discuss something from your group about questions number 2 and 3. Brooke. Yes, everyone at the remote sites also have the questions. They should be on a colored piece of paper that we're given to you separately. So if any comments you have will be welcome at 11 also. Thank you. All right. Can I have your attention again? So who has something they'd like to share, and this is open to remote sites too, just let David know, but who has something that they feel is, at least, it doesn't have to be the most brilliant thing in the world, just what's a good idea about what we could do either statewide or system-wide to help our students? Yes. Please, at the microphone, if you will.
I'm an adjunct counselor here at Folsom Lake Community College, and starting up the Career Center here, and we are so excited about that. And one of the things that we talked about at our table and that we've talked about in the Career Center is that there's a real fear that students have of making a decision. It's like it's carved in stone, right? She was saying that. And I think helping them realize that it's not carved in stone, that they can still make changes along their life path. And as far as how the system, statewide system could help is we've been talking about this at Folsom, and it's interesting because Tracy and I just shared, they have the same idea at Sacramento City, and that's to make sure that the career development piece is infused at the beginning in the orientation. And Michelle, my partner here at the Career Center, actually came up with an idea of having them have a golden ticket to be able to come and get registration, and that's doing the orientation with that infused career piece.
Okay, so the golden ticket reflects the fact they have done the career kind of work.
That they've done the whole assessment, and as part of the regular assessment of the reading, writing, math, that the career piece is in there.
Okay, and then they take that golden ticket
to be able to register.
To be able to register. Okay, nice. I like it. All right, how about another one? If you'll go to the microphone.
Okay, here in San Mateo, we were talking about the possibility...
One second. I'm sorry. We'll go ahead. We'll give one to the remote, and then we'll take you next, okay? Yes, the remote site.
Yeah, we were talking about the possibility of creating a 2-year associate degree that was standardized at all community colleges in California, similar to a general studies degree or a liberal arts degree, that students could come in if they were totally undeclared and struggling with what to do. We could at least put them on that track, and that track would pay dividends down the road if they changed their mind. So the courses would be transferable, but it would be something we could start out with, giving them a degree, an action plan.
Okay, you're saying a mandated then 2-year associate degree for not mandated.
Not
sorry, wrong word.
Mandated.
Standard.
Yeah,
standardized.
And it's portable. So if I started that a particular associate degree at San Mateo and I moved to Southern California, I could pursue that same degree at a community college in Southern California.
Okay, a statewide standardized. Okay, good. All right, thank you
Or
for sharing.
portable degree.
All right, good. All right, your turn.
Okay, so I am a high school counselor, and I think a key component is really the articulation with the community colleges, and we're just blessed to have Sierra College in our own backyard, and I know there's quite a few Sierra College people here today. So what they've provided us is they have a STEM grant, and through the STEM grant, Chris Hinterman, is she here?
No, she's at another dentist.
Okay. She provided Del Oro High School with the opportunity to use career cruising, which is a wonderful, wonderful tool for high school students to do college and career exploration. So that grant has been going on for, I want to say, 3 years. Well, but we've been using it for 3 years, and it's just invaluable. So our students start the freshman year with a student portfolio. Each grade level guidance, we build on that. And Chris has just been instrumental in helping us continue with that program.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mendocino, you're on.
So as an assistant superintendent of a high school and sitting here with my colleagues at the community college level, we've been talking about this whole notion of career readiness and goal-oriented, and really talked about the notion of getting on the same page by establishing a common language, a definition, because a career goal at a community college level may be a little different than what we see at the K-12 level. And as far as the focus is concerned about a job readiness, are we using industry sectors? We don't know what the jobs of the future hold, but we want to be able to start getting on the same page.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good point. Great. All right, just in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next question. because this one's really important to me. I think the hardest part is that we can develop the best materials in the world, but if we don't have really effective ways to communicate with our students and let them know about these things and say it in a way that they can listen to, then it really just doesn't really have much impact. So this question or discussion question addresses that. What kind of messaging might be developed that would get their attention and mobilize our students around the importance of declaring a career goal and developing an education plan? In other words, what can we say to them that's going to motivate them and get them to understand why this is such a critical task for them? So take a couple minutes to discuss that one. All right. Let's start with our group here, and just to remind you, if you'd come up and share at the microphone. We really desperately need some ideas for a good way to message this. It's going to motivate students to be able to understand the importance. Do we have any ideas that have come forth? Looks like some good conversation went on. And remember, it doesn't have to be brilliant, just anything you have that you can share. Okay, good. And then in our second one over there, and then we'll go to a remote.
I have a really exciting table here that I got to join, and one of the things that came up is that we need to really use technology more, like social media and Facebook, and have apps, because how many people here walking across campus have seen a student without a phone? You know, they all have their phones. So, and one of the things that I think is really important that someone brought up is that you have to do it like an hour before an event. If you send something, you text them or post on their Facebook or send an app or whatever, it has to be immediate. If you do it 2 weeks in advance, forget it. And then another really important part is tying the events that we offer in the Career Center into the instructional side, so that they make, at first we came up with the idea of extra credit, that if they attend a workshop or whatever, but then we thought, well, actually it should be an assignment, because a lot of students won't do the extra credit. But if we could get the business department, the philosophy, all of the departments committed to having assignments that connect to their career and their life planning.
Right. Absolutely, but did your group come up with any ideas on actual messaging? I know that's the techniques, and that's great, but I mean actual things that we can say that are going. Yes, or just concepts about what will they relate to that will help them to understand the importance of this.
Did we address that? We might have misread the question. But I think the messaging is your career and your success is in the power of your own hands. That's a message.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. One more from Mara, and then we'll go remote. I think the young woman at the table over here. Yes.
So the first thing that came to my mind was when you're driving on the highways and you see those big signs that say cell phone in one hand, ticket in the other. So it's that kind of catchy messaging, but it's also has that consequential messaging. And so we had a discussion about, wouldn't it be nice if we could have it be a more motivating message and more positive, but at the same time, how do you message the consequences? I mean, do you want to say no declared major, no enrollment priority, big posters around campus, that kind of thing? It's just not very positive. So that's where we're at, and we don't really have any great ideas.
So you're saying the ones that if you use your cell phone, you get a ticket. You mean when you're driving? Is that what you're saying? Those,
right? Yeah.
So you're trying to find a way to use that same, because that is eye-catching. Yes.
And it's that quick messaging that Michelle's referring to with the social media, and those text-size messages, I think, are important. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. We're going to let our remote site. Do we have any comments from the remote sites?
So our group came up with the message that time is money, and that we should be letting students know that they're investing time in courses, and that they need to invest time in courses that are helping them meet their goals and moving towards a goal that they've actually researched well. And I'm a dual enrollment counselor. I work at City College of San Francisco, and we're planning to go into the high school and...
You can. I was just going to...
make the messaging clear, get students into maybe 1 unit or half unit college preparing courses that'll get them to explore different careers and get familiar with what their options are after high school graduation.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, I didn't have real good reception. Did everyone else hear her? Was it just me? Is there anyone here that could summarize it? Can you just give us another key point of that? Because our reception wasn't real good at our end.
So time is money, to tell students that they're investing time in courses and that they should be investing time in courses that are helping them meet their goals, and that they should be moving towards goals that they've researched well. And so maybe starting in high school even, starting in the high school and going into dual enrollment, college preparedness classes, getting them familiar with what careers are available to them.
Great. Thank you very much. We got it. I particularly like the time is money because they do care about that. Yes, one more from the remote side, Eileen. Mendocino. Okay, you're on, Mendocino.
Hi. We had a lot of ideas, but we put them all together in one idea. And the main point was to have student stories from students that show the passion, outline that it's a pathway. You can start in high school, go to a 2-year school, go to a 4-year school, go to work, and that also these stories could be told through financial aid, any of the EOPS, all the different counselors, people that go out and are recruiting. So anyway, the idea of having the students tell the stories to make them short, passionate, and kind of be examples of how they may have started one place and ended another place. They could start.
And why the career goal mattered. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I know we all tend to listen to stories more than we do just data or anything else. Everyone really appreciates that. So good idea. Okay. How about any last one from either remote or the site here? Fresno would like to speak up. Go Fresno.
Hey, Gabe, Fresno. We had a question in the back of the room, but we're not sure if you can hear us. Wait, what's the in the back wanted to talk?
Fresno.
Oh, we're Fresno.
Okay. We can hear Fresno. I believe that's Julie. Go ahead.
Yes, it is. Hold on a second. Okay. Tell me your question.
Our group said time and money. That's what gets students' attention. So if you say good career planning means you're going to save time and save money.
Okay, so I think another one of the remote sites had talked about time and money too. I agree. That always captures their attention.
They heard us. That was good. Okay.
Okay. Any last one thing that anyone wants to share?
Is there
something else from a remote site?
I'm from San Mateo College. Can you hear me?
San Mateo, go ahead, San Mateo.
This is really thinking out of the box. And so I came to, in our group, we discussed it, and actually a counselor from Contra Costa College, she brought it up, and again, thinking out of the box, and it's where, why do you give students a choice to decide? Why not have them come in and decide on what their major is? And I know it's really cut and dry. That's why she didn't want to come down and say it, because I think it's a great idea, but why not even try and do a pilot project to see if students come in, don't give them a choice to be undecided, have them decide. And if you can do a pilot project to see how does that work, because we've tried everything else, but why not see if you don't give them a choice? Force to do something. Just being out of the box.
Forced choice?
Well, not having a decided choice, right? Forced choice. It's a lot.
Well, you're saying undecided is not an option.
Exactly.
You have to make a choice. Pardon me, I was going to conclude with an idea I have, which is not really an idea. It's just what I know, is that students don't do optional. So at some point it has to be built into the system so that they, through whatever process, and I hope we allow a good process because we know this isn't something to take lightly, but also that is just a mandatory part. If they want to be part of our registration and part of our college, they need to go through this and make a decision, and that it's really not optional. So I will end with that. And those are some good ideas. I particularly like the time and money. I think we need to also show them the relevance and the difference it can make. And I like the idea about stories, if they can understand from a student's perspective. I didn't know what I was doing. I made a decision, and it's changed everything for me. So there's lots that we can do. So continue to think about that. I want to draw your attention. We don't have time to discuss it, but I want to draw your attention to the last question because I think it's really important. And that is, what can you do on your campus to get involved as a professional around the New Student Success Act? We really do, around this whole arena of career area, have a lot of expertise to share. So this is not a time to stay quiet and sit on your hands. It's really a time to get involved, to go find out who it is on your campus that's leading this effort, and ask to join that team. So I want to thank Sonia and Kim and Deborah for coming today. We would love to have you stay with us, for however long you can. I'm going to be covering what we're doing on the Career Cafe right now before we break for lunch. We'd love to have you for lunch, but we also are very respectful of your time, so whatever works for you. All right, let's move on then. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, what's going to happen now? We're just a little behind schedule, not too bad. We're going to talk about what we've been working on because we really need your input on that, and some discussion from all of you around your ideas about how we can share that, how we can get it out, how we can implement that. So let's take a peek at what we got. Is there a way to take the lights down a little bit, Brooke? Do you know? Without those big ones, I think you'll be able to, because we're going to show a video, and I think it's going to be easier to see. Is that better? All right. All right, so the Career Action Plan is what I'm calling the program that we've developed that's going to help a student determine a career goal. So what is this Career Action Plan? It's going to be an interactive tool or guide that's going to lead the student through the cafe with the outcome of a career goal decision and therefore the ability to create an educational plan. And it's obvious why we need it. We want our students to be able to find their path. I always find it so interesting that, the career programs on our campus are listed differently than some of the transfer and all the rest of it. But yet, ultimately, every single one of us is in the educational institution because we want to find a career. I mean, some people obviously not, but the ones that we really need to serve are really there because all of us end up with a career of one sort or another. So we're there to help our students be able to figure out what it is that they're best suited for. And the research is very clear, and it comes up again and again. A student that has a career plan gets better grades, actually participates more in a rigorous curriculum, and has a greater likelihood of completing their degree, including 4 years of post-secondary. So there they are. They've completed it. They're moving on. Right now, the reason we're working on this Career Action Plan and our resources have gone toward developing that to place it on the Career Cafe is because it meets one of the critical requirements that Sonia's been talking about all morning of the SB 1456, and that is that students will develop a career goal and create an education plan. There he is. He's done it. So let's take a look. How many of you, out of curiosity, are familiar with the cafe? Actually, we get started section of the cafe. Show of hands. Okay, so most of the people, but there's a few of you that haven't. Because I'm going to go ahead and show you then the pieces that I think are critical. We're not going to be able to show all of them. Anyway, I'm saying the reason that it's been developed in this kind of format as an interactive guide was so that it could be almost like a link. It's a package that could be just given to the high schools, and then this could be something that they complete. And then when they're ready to come to the college for their counseling session, they'd have a worksheet to be able to bring. You'll see how that works. Okay, let's take a look. This is what we're calling the CAP.
Hi, Issa Adney here, host of The Skinny on TCC 22 and author of the book Community College Success, with tips on how to be successful in college and in life. When it comes to college majors, choosing one early can save you a lot of money. In fact, changing majors is one of the things that drives up college costs because it takes students longer to finish when they keep changing their mind. Does that mean you should stick with a major that you hate? Definitely not. The key is to do your research as early as possible to discover the best major for you. Make choosing your major an entire course and put as much effort into it as you would any other college class. Spend time researching every week. Interview people with majors you're considering. Interview people who have your dream jobs. Take personality and skill tests that correlate with college majors, and visit your college's career center. Should also research online and read everything you can. Once you've done the research, choose the major that excites and motivates you more than any other. And then be sure to meet with your advisor to create an educational plan that ensures you'll save money by only taking the classes you need so you can graduate on time.
Now that comes up automatically. What you'll see, this is basically the front end, the table of contents, which it just switched on me. I'm going to stop that so it doesn't do that. But it's basically telling them that there's 3 steps to this. And again, we've tried to keep it really simple so that a student doesn't get overwhelmed with just too much direction and too much to do. You did notice back on that first page it said audio guide. Well, that's not completed yet, but it will be in there so the student can just click on that and it will just basically give them simple directions about how to go through this and what to do with that final worksheet that they're going to take to a counselor. So this is step number 1, and this should look real familiar to you if you've been on the Career Cafe. This is the Identify Your Strengths and Talents, which is one of the basic first lessons that they go through. So how many of you have not seen this before, this particular lesson? A couple of you. Okay, I'm going to just show you how it works. You'll see next steps. There is a video that they would view, which I don't want to take the time to show the whole thing today. This is one of my favorites, though, that Tom Kelly from IDEO talks about.
I met Francis Ford Coppola.
I'll let it go for a minute or two.
We're both on the same speaking calendar in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And Coppola said this thing. He said, you know, it's kind of obvious, but he said, look, this is really simple. He said, do what you love, not because you just want to be, you know, self-interested. He says, do it because you'll be better at it. He says, I love wine, and so I have a winery, and I think it's pretty good. He said, I love food, and, you know, so I have a restaurant business, and I have a pasta business, right? He's starting a resort, apparently, in South America, and he says he uses all of those just to generate cash so he can finance his own movies, right? And so, pretty obvious, but I hadn't thought of it in those terms. Do what you love because you'll be better. You'll be willing to put in the extra time, the extra mental energy, because you love it. It's been several years ago, I saw Jim Collins speak. Anybody read any of his books? He wrote 2 great books. Oh, a lot of people. So Built to Last and then Good to Great, right? And it's several years ago, and he used no slides of any kind. He's drawn circles in the air like this. But there was something he said that has stuck with me. I remember like it was yesterday. And he was talking, at first it seemed he was talking about companies. But as he got into it, it really seemed like he was talking to us each as individuals. And he said, trying to think of what you should do next, he says, think about these 3 circles. And the first circle is, what are you good at? He says, by the time you reach a certain age, most people have a sense of what they're good at. Right? He says, but watch out for this circle, because in this circle, he says, lives the curse of competence. Right? Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you should do it. He says, you might be, if you look around your school or your office, you might discover you're the fastest person you ever met at the keyboard. He says, does that mean you should be a data entry operator? Probably not, right? He said he was really good at math. And everybody said to him, Jim, you should be a math major. And so he listened to that advice, and he got to school, and he continued to be good at math, but he ran into people living in the second circle. And the second circle is, what are you born to do? Right? When are you the happiest? When are you in a state of flow? And he said he met people, I think it was mostly guys, he met people who were never happier than when they were solving equations, right, and doing proofs. And he said, you know, I realized that good as I was at math, this is not my true calling, right? And so he thought about those 2 circles. Then he thought about this third one. He says, don't overemphasize this one, but you got to think about it, which is, what will people pay you to do? Because he said, you know, they say do what you love and the money will follow. He says it's not literally true. He said his favorite thing is to listen to Brahms symphonies. He says there are Brahms symphonies I've listened to 100 times.
I'm going to stop it there because I think most of you have seen it. It's a great video if you haven't seen it. He goes on to talk about just one last piece that's left, and that is you have to really like the people that you work with. And what you'll see, let me see if I can escape out of this. Sorry. Be it? Yes. What you'll see is that worksheet there, and I didn't make a copy of this one for you, but it's a great one that the student would then be able to print and complete the student activity. You'll see that as the last one. They print out this particular worksheet, and they end up filling out answering those 3 questions that Tom Kelly addressed in that particular video. The other thing that they do in this lesson is they go to Stanford. Now, this is a very comprehensive site. All of these are free assessments. You're aware of the fact that anything that's grant funded needs to be free for our students. Like I know our high school partner mentioned career cruising, that's great, but it's not free. So we don't on the cafe load anything there that costs a fee. So all of ours are for free. You know, I'm hoping students also go to their career center and take advantage of other resources, but at least this is the basics are there. This is excellent. If you haven't been to Stanford, this is an excellent process to go through. Now, it's not short. You know, students would say, oh, that takes too long. That different out of our 2.4 million students, some are ready for this and some are not. I anticipate that this will students will get there mostly by a professional guiding them there, and so you can very specifically tell them just exactly how much you want them to complete. So that's under the Know Thyself. The How Are You Smart is the multiple intelligence, another assessment that they can take or not. And then discover ways to use their intelligences. If we want to get our students really not just career ready, but also college ready, this is basic information they're going to have to know about themselves. And then they'll print and complete that student activity, and they're done with step 1. Okay, now let's move to step 2. I heard Sonia refer to this morning that one of the things they were considering was through CCC Apply to send the students to O-Net. Well, you'll see here we have complete an O-Net interest profiler. First, there'll be a video, which I'm not going to take you to, but it basically explains the Holland Code and how a student, you know, can determine what they're interested in. You'll see, I love the new O-Net interest profiler. They've done a fabulous job with this. And again, this gives them directions on how to go through that and take that quick assessment that we're all familiar with. Now, how do I get back? There we go. And then the student activity, let's take a peek at what that looks like. Because the worksheets, as you know, are just like on the cafe. They're all embedded right there, so a student can just bring that up. And we may not, yes, well, oh dear. I'm not going to, I don't know if this is a long process or not. There it is, where they really look at their personalities, you know, based on Cooter, I mean on the, sorry, where's, the RIASAC, the Holland Code, sorry, and come up with what their Holland Code is, and it shows them where to go look and how that translates to different careers. I had my son do this again. He'd done it earlier, and he was surprised. I think the interesting part about career information, and Sonia referred to her 5 through her 15-year-old kids, you can't do this once. You really can't. Have you noticed how much they change, how much we change? You know, it's really something where I hope once these tools and resources are there, that they'll realize they can go back and do it again, and from the different perspective that they have at different ages. All right. So that's step 2, then, is really about their interest and being able to determine that. Pretty simple so far. And then the third step, this I really feel is the core piece. It's going to help them to be able to make a decision. This is the one we've been working on how to set a career goal. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to view the video, and I'm going to let you take a look at that, because we have heard in Aiden Eli, the young man that greeted us this morning first, one of the first things he told me, he goes, I go to high schools all the time. And he said, our students do not know how to make important decisions. You know, it's either there are all different kinds of styles out there of doing things, but no one's really ever taught them a process of how to do this. So I want to show you something and see how you feel about what we've developed around that.
Decision making is a vital skill used by everyone. Every decision you've made in your life has brought you to where you are right now. Making good or bad decisions has a greater effect than even your level of formal education. So streamlining this process is vital to any type of success. The first step in the decision-making process is know your objectives. What are your goals, and can this opportunity bring you closer to achieving them? List everything that is probable and possible. After you know your objectives, you must list and analyze the pros and cons or strengths and weaknesses of your available options. Weigh those options carefully. Do the research and seek expert advice on each and every one of them. Next, ask yourself if this opportunity will ever present itself again. Some opportunities are a one-time only deal, and you have to grab them before they slip away. Then, seek advice. Accept the positive and negative input of others. Make sure you know where that advice is coming from or how they derived at it. Evaluate that advice against your objectives. When you have all of your data, look at it closely. Make a tentative decision and then further evaluate it to look for any possible consequences. Finalize your decision and then take decisive action. Finally, review your decision after some time has passed. Write down what went right and if anything went wrong. The act of writing it down and looking at it will help ingrain this experience so you can use it in further decisions. Remember, taking advantage of opportunities boils down to you making the right decision at the right time. Sometimes those decisions must be made quickly, so it's important to practice this decision-making process. So when an opportunity presents itself, you know exactly what to do.
All right, let's see if I can get back here. Oops. All right. Oops. I have too many things open. Have you noticed? How do I get back to my... That's the PowerPoint. That one. Okay. There we go. I hope. Okay, so let's... Sorry, the mouse is difficult. Oh, dear. Thank you for coming up and helping me. I appreciate it. I could use it.
I wasn't sure. I don't know where you went.
I just want to go back to step 3. Well, I don't want the PowerPoint. I'm inside the cap. Yeah. Okay, so we're good. That's step 2. Now we'll go to step 3. And we won't be showing any more videos, so we're good. All right, so you can see it's the steps on step 3 are to view the video. Then there's a quick decision-making style quiz that is actually really cool. I'll take a look at it. We're not going to go through it. But it really helps them decide how they make decisions, and they get a printout. But what I really like about this one, and let me go back. What I really like about this one is then at the end of it, based on your one of 4 types of decision makers, that then it will give you career exploration activities. Like mine was an intuitive, I don't forget exactly what the words were that it used, but it told me specifically to go out and talk to people. It gave me like 3 or 4 different things to do. So at the end of that quiz, then they can go to the results page, and it will give them actions to take to further clarify that decision, and if it's an appropriate one for them.
How do I get rid of these camera controls now?
The important piece here is the last piece is print out and take a look at this student activity, and this is the one that I want you all to look at. It's in the folder behind your agenda.
Okay, thanks.
Same with our remote sides. Take a look at that particular worksheet. And I want to just briefly go through that. Because this whole third piece here, this step 3, doesn't work very well unless they've gone through step 1 and step 2, as you can see. Remember, step 1 was really being able to identify their strengths and talents. There was some about multiple intelligence. The second one was about the interest. But actually, even in step 1, when they went to the Stanford site, there's values, skills, personality. There's 4 or 5 different kinds of assessments that they can do as part of that. So they would have completed a lot of assessments before they get to this third step. I just want to reiterate that. And then at this point, it really is like what our young woman over here was saying. It's almost like a forced choice. It's kind of like, okay, you know all that stuff, now let's just get to it and make a decision. So they're going to identify 5 options. What are kind of 5 things that you've come up with that you think you're well suited for? Then they're going to learn to list the pros and cons of that. And we've told them that if you can't think of any pros and cons, then why don't you go to your Career Center and do some research around these, and you'll find out pretty quickly more about it, or talk to people, whatever it is. So they have to list the pros and cons of those 5 options. Then they have to compare those with the consequences. And it could be in terms of how long does this take to get a degree? Do I have to move to get a job in this particular area? All kinds of things they'd have to consider based on what jobs they're looking at. And then they have to rank them. So they're going to look at that. They've already listed the pros and cons, thought about the consequences. Now they have to rank them, and they have to make a decision. And it says, for right now, based on the options I identified, what is the most important to me, my number 1 career choice at this time? So we're trying to really reinforce realizing this isn't a forever thing, just at this time, what's my choice? And then the 6th thing that we ask them to do is take action. And that is, take action to accomplish your goal, meet with a counselor, and create your educational plan and schedule. And I'll tell you, a lot of this I took the concept for this to also the Career Advisory Committee that Deborah Sheldon chairs at the Chancellor's Office, and certainly our Career Development Advisory Committee has taken a look at this too. And again, I remember one of the counselors telling me that day, she goes, I need something in my hand like this, meaning she liked the option we gave her that had choices, like at the beginning where it says list your options, your top 5. She said, even though they've come up with an idea, it gives me something to talk to about. I know that those are kind of the 5 areas of interest, instead of just a student coming in without anything and just going through the whole conversation about this. So we know there's nothing locked in stone here. I mean, they've made a choice. I wish there were some guarantees about where that would go or if it would even be right for them. But at least it's lots of opportunities for counselors to have conversations with students or in a classroom setting to be able to, have lots of group talk around this. So you've kind of seen what the 3 steps are. As I say, we're trying to keep this simple but yet comprehensive enough so that it feels like that they've gone through a process that we can feel is valid, to come up with at least a decision for the time being. Now, what I need from all of you is some response, some idea. Where do you think we are on this? And then I'm going to ask for some some ideas about how this could be used by you or someone on your campus. So we have one back here. If you'll come to the microphone, please.
I always feel like we're doubling our efforts sometimes with the community college counselors when they get our students for the first time. So we use California Career Zone and the cafe with our seniors, and I love this. The part that I would love to add is not the comprehensive plan, but the initial educational plan that they were talking about that you have to have within those first two.
Right.
We have a lot of hold over our students because they don't know yet that they have freedom when they're with us. And so we can say, you can't go to senior picnic, you can't move on, you can't do these different events, and they believe us. And so if we were trained, or the idea of the template that she was talking about, where once they've done this, you give that to us, and part of their senior experience of leaving is that they would come to you with that from us.
With like once they've decided on that career, then they have a template for that particular career that shows them what the path looks like.
Exactly, because we're doing this stuff anyway, and so if we could do what you want us to do with them that aligns with what you're doing, I think we wouldn't be doubling our efforts, and we'd probably be saving everyone some time.
Well, I think you're going to find there's going to be a lot more coordination with the high schools. Everything I'm reading, and Deborah, help me if I'm wrong here, but what I'm reading is with a lot of the new legislation that the partnerships with high school, with workforce groups, with everything has become very critical. Would you like to respond? Well, just microphone, please. You can come to this one if you want.
I don't know if I have a response, but I actually ended up having a question, which was, what's the best way to communicate with high school counselors to get this message out? Because I think that was an excellent suggestion. And I think we're interested in seeing more of a coordination happening. Sonia mentioned about the Common Core and what we're doing statewide from a curriculum standpoint. But as far as this collaboration between high school counselors and college counseling offices, that was my question, is how can we facilitate that? What's the best way to get high school counselors and college counselors on the same page?
Yes.
Of course, in the perfect world, if what Sonia was talking about, if it was actually mandated through the high schools, because where we struggle, if it's not mandated, we don't get the time with the kids. We're always fighting for that. Can we just have 20 minutes? Can we just have a class period? So that's the tricky part. But coming down and giving us the information, just coming in and saying, hey, I want to meet with your counseling group. This is the information we need. Probably the best way to do it would be through the district office of each district so that you're hitting all those high schools at once. But you're going to run into the same trouble that probably we're running into. Is it something that if it's not mandated, they'll give us the time to do? Right. I guess. We're doing it anyway, but we're fighting for time.
Right. And I think to me right now, and I'm glad that Deborah's here and taking some of these notes, because it's a big job. But the fact that we have high school counselors here today, I think is great, and at many of our workshops we do. And it's up to all of us, because you know your high school counselors that you work with. So for now, I'm really hopeful that you will continue to share resources with them and to say, what would help, and this is what we've heard, and this is a great idea or a new best practice. Brooke, do you have a comment? And then we'll let it go to remote side, I promise.
The advisory committee has been looking at this for quite some time and trying to come up with what can this intervention be that Sonia talked about. We have to get students to declare this career goal. So the feedback that we're really looking from you is, while we know everyone likes to have kind of a personal approach and every district is not the same, can we get the basics well enough covered in this module that we could potentially get this adopted statewide? That's really our intent, is to put our stamp on the Student Success Act, to move our students forward out of our expertise, and provide every single district the opportunity to have a very quick, easily accessible, and free resource to move students this way. So that's the entire intent. So if we can get agreement on that, and the more we can get the students to do it at the high school level and come in prepared with that piece, then that, of course, alleviates the pressure on us, and the students will move much more quickly. Things that we're contemplating at our college, and it's already been done at some other colleges, is in the assessment process having some kind of questions around students' career readiness. So if there was just a self-proclaimed scale on how certain are you of the career goal that you actually put on your application on a scale of 1 to 10, and you know how they get a prescription if they score a certain level on assessment, it says you must now take this class, or you now are eligible to take this class, that if they scored themselves in different ranges, it's like, you must. Will we ever follow them up and lasso them and tie them into a chair? No. But they believe us, like the high school, they don't know yet that they don't have to do musts, is that you must now go to the Career Center and attend this workshop. And even for the students that are at the very high level, they said that they're very, very certain, we would still give them a prescription. Then you should go into your career center and check into internships, cooperative work experience. How else can you continue on this career goal? You're not done just because you've declared a major. And our piece on the templates is that we may move to a template, but here, at least for our CTE programs at Sierra, we're establishing flowcharts for there to be a very visual, easy way for students to see and for counselors to explain how do you progress semester to semester through that sequence of major courses, especially when they are sequential or when prerequisites don't make it clear. You know, our faculty have a very clear idea about exactly which order they'd like students to go through, but they don't always let us know, and they certainly don't tell students. So we're working this summer to establish in each of our CTE programs that flowchart that would be put on the website and be put out. I don't think we'll get it into the catalog yet because it's just a recommendation, but I think that would also help our high school counselors to be able to pull that up and show students, okay, well, in your first semester, you better make sure you're in these classes.
Right. Okay, that's great. Brooke, I also heard you asking, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard you asking, do you feel as career professionals that what we've done so far with these simple 3 steps, does it cover it? Are we missing something? Is there too much? I'd like just a little feedback about your thoughts about that.
And we'll also give you time to play and check back with you, you know, like in a month as well. So don't
but you can actually go in and look at all the assessments.
We've been playing with it for
Rita?
6 or 8 weeks. So the
Can
more
you hear us?
we'll give you a chance. But right now, yes, if anything,
Just off the top of your head, yes. Just to the. I promise, remotes, we will get to you. I apologize.
Mendocino?
I think in the decision making, because I use on course and we go through the decision making process, they don't get that until you actually give an example. So I don't know if you can put like a basic decision that a lot of people make and then break it down because
that's a good idea.
That's just words to them until you say, how do I choose a shirt today? What are my consequences? You know, that kind of thing. And then they'll get it because they don't get
so give
that.
it. No, that's an excellent suggestion.
And I don't know if you want, I don't know about the music either. So I don't know. I don't know if you're changing stuff like that, but the music
on what on that video, the videos,
yeah, on the video.
they're already done.
Okay,
we have to use free videos. I didn't put the music on the video. Trust me.
Even the intro music when you first step one.
Yeah,
I don't know what that was. Okay.
Again Issa's music. I know. You know what they can do is turn their volume down is what they can do. I am going to go. I'm sorry, remotes. I apologize. It's taken me so long. We will go to the remote. Any comments about ideas on implementing the CAP, just general ideas about it, or your input?
Mendocino? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mendocino,
Okay.
You're on.
In Humboldt County, there is a model. It's called the Decade of Difference, and it's a cooperative with the Workforce Investment Board and all of the different school levels from middle school through the university level that is focusing on this. There was a concern about the small number of students who are actually graduating and going on to get further education. And we can send that a model to you if you're interested, but it involves career development starting in the 7th and 8th grade, going through high school, and then continuing on through the university and community college levels.
Great, Michael. Hi there. I see you. I could tell by your voice before I even looked that was you. Great. We'd love to see it. Send it to us. Okay. Any other remote comments or sharing? Pretty quiet on that front. Okay, here's someone. Is that you, Candy?
Oh no, I was trying to turn off the. Somebody has. Yes, we do. As a matter of fact.
All right, you're on, Mendocino.
Mendocino, and I'm from the secondary level, and again, there was an earlier comment about that there is the message needs to be clear about certain, consequences, but maybe if we take this and we actually embed it into an A to G course and create that template at the secondary level, then that incentive is there for those for the students to take that course for different reasons. But you embed, the type of career exploration that you're presenting right now, and so it's in a class for those students that are on the A to G course, but also offer to other students as a way to, again, explore. And again, many of our students are going to the community college. So maybe that's an opportunity to, again, back to the second question about what can we do to develop statewide a system. Maybe create, just like we did with the expository reading and writing course at the secondary level.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you're saying embedding it and then also just making it a mandatory program?
Not necessarily an option. In other words, if it's a course that's offered at the high school level,
right.
and again, so we have those students that, again, many of them will believe that they're going on to a 4-year, but along the way, this is a course that, again, it's an option that they have at the secondary level and gives them that opportunity to, wherever they go, where it's still school to work, but it really does prepare them to post-secondary endeavors.
Right. Good. Thank you. In fact, I think it was talked about earlier about embedding this somewhere. It's interesting when we talk about how few students actually take career planning classes or actually go to the Career Center or do anything direct around that. But yet, what I find with students is once they're into this and learning about it, they really enjoy it and they really like learning about themselves. So some of it is embedding it in things that they're doing anyway, so they don't know, instead of consciously thinking that they're going to go sign up for something like this, because they don't until they get desperate. Yes. Microphone.
High school district.
Uh-huh.
We're high school counselors from the Nevada Joint Union High School District, and we were talking about how we could use this. We've used it occasionally with some of our freshmen, but to actually incorporate it into our senior projects, because a senior project is actually something that is required of all of our seniors, and it's connected to a career, but for them to do this research and in a more sequential way would be a really good idea. And so we're going to take this back to our district council meeting. The other thing that one might consider is possibly associating credits with it in regard to like 2+2 articulation agreements, where maybe with our American government classes or econ classes, or I don't know, we could figure out what classes all the seniors take, that if they complete the required assessments, that once they reach the college level, they would get maybe a credit or two or something like that.
Okay,
Thank
good
you.
ideas. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, one last comment. We do get to have lunch today. One last comment. Anything from remote sites or here at Folsom? Any last ones? Good. I think everyone's hungry. You guys have been very patient and wonderful. Brooke, what kind of direction would you like to give us about lunch? And we'll sign off for now. Thank you, remote sites. Enjoy your lunch. We'll see you later.